No Indian can forget the fateful night in February 2019 when Abhinandan Varthaman, Indian Air Force hero, was taken captive in Pakistan. Now, a brand new book actually reveals dramatic details about how his freedom was secured. According to this book, written by veteran diplomat Ambassador Ajay Bisaria, it was the success of India's coercive diplomacy and India's very clear message to the world that if any harm came to Abhinandan Varthaman, the escalation would be serious and would be real. This is only one of the many dramatic revelations, a revelation about which the Prime Minister had once referenced that India and Pakistan had come very close to what he called at a rally a Qatal ki Raat, that is captured in this book by Ajay Bisaria, who was expelled from Pakistan in the aftermath of the abrogation of Article 370. The book looks at contemporary issues, at historical details, but also asks the fundamental futuristic question: can there ever be peace between India and Pakistan? And then the even more philosophical question: does it matter that much to India any longer? There's a lot to talk about with the author of the book, veteran diplomat, expelled diplomat. Let's welcome Ajay Bisaria to the program now. Congratulations to you, Ambassador Bisaria. And I was particularly struck by one of the openings and closings of the book. The book starts with your expulsion and it ends with your hope that you are not the last listed High Commissioner to Pakistan, because things have been, of course, in cold freeze for several years now since you were expelled. Let's start, though, with the story that's making waves everywhere. The Qatal ki Raat reference. This was a sentence used by the Prime Minister when he looked back at how India secured the freedom, the release of Indian Air Force hero Abhinandan Varthaman, then a wing commander who had spent 60 hours in captivity. Now, what's very, very interesting is your revelations in the book Anger Management, where you reveal how serious India was about escalating matters if any harm came to Abhinandan Varthaman, how this was conveyed in particular to the United States and UK envoys who conveyed it back to their governments, and how at one point the Pakistan Foreign Secretary pauses a meeting that she's having with envoys of the P5 countries to say that she has received a message from the Pakistan army that 9 missiles are pointed from India towards Pakistan. She also references the increased aggression by the Indian Navy. I don't think this has ever been revealed before, how serious India was about escalating the threat if any harm would have come to Abhinandan Varthaman. Can you talk about that time and the story you tell in your book?
Thank you, Barkha, for having me on your show. And thank you for this opportunity. This was a particularly telling episode, I think, in the diplomacy between our countries. And it was a moment when India's coercive diplomacy succeeded in getting an outcome and getting an outcome very fast. And I think the evidence has been around, but what I do is I go into more granular detail, give more color to exactly what was transpiring behind the scenes, to tell the reader that what was happening was an episode of coercive diplomacy, and a successful one at that, in making a point to Pakistan that India would escalate in case the objectives were not met. We had a case study before this of another Air Force pilot called Nachiketa in 1999. You would be familiar with that story. You covered Kargil so well. And I think there we took a few weeks to get that pilot back. We had to get the Red Cross involved, and there were many hiccups at that point. There was much grandstanding that was going on. In Pakistan, there was a narrative building up that they have an Indian prisoner of war. He should be used as a tool for negotiation. to make India behave in one or the other way. And I think India made that point bilaterally as well as globally that this was non-negotiable. The pilot had to be returned by a deadline, or India would escalate. And I think that message went down clearly to Pakistan, which made its change its behavior.
Your book also talks about the attempt by Imran Khan, then Prime Minister of Pakistan, to reach out to Prime Minister Modi. A midnight call that comes through Suhail Mahmood. He calls you, a senior Pakistan bureaucrat, then Foreign Secretary of Pakistan, calls you. He says his Prime Minister would like to speak with Prime Minister Modi. You write that you check upstairs, you check with your bosses, that request for a call is evidently declined. Imran Khan is snubbed. The Prime Minister sees no merit in having that conversation with him. Can you recall more about that moment?
Yes, certainly. And just a clarification, Suhail Mahmood was at that point my counterpart and the
I'm so
putative
sorry.
foreign
I'm so
secretary.
sorry. I'm so sorry. It's
So he
tough to
was.
keep track of Pakistan bureaucracy, but I stand corrected. Go ahead. Yes.
Yes, so he was my counterpart in posted in Delhi as High Commissioner, and he was then in Pakistan because both of us had been recalled by our governments or been called in by our governments after Pulwama, and were part of the decision teams or the action teams in our respective capitals. So I was in touch with him off and on in this period, and he calls me at midnight and says that Prime Minister Imran Khan wants to speak to Prime Minister Modi, and would that be possible? And I said, it's midnight, but I still checked. And I reverted and said that, look, our Prime Minister is not available, but if there's any urgent message, feel free to pass it on to me. I'll ensure it's passed on. And he said, okay, let me go and check back and I'll come back to you. But he never did that night. For me, what that demonstrated is that India's message had gone loud and clear to Pakistan about the escalation, and Imran Khan was being used for the de escalation. And it was quite clear that India's asks were clear, and we had various channels open. So what we wanted was a clear indication that the partner would be, that the pilot would be returned, and we didn't want to enter into negotiation on what India should or shouldn't do to achieve that outcome. So I think that was at that point the decision taken by the Indian government.
But can I ask you to elaborate just a little more on a riveting passage in the book where you obviously don't disclose your source, but you say that this was told to you by one of the P5 members, the Pakistan Foreign Secretary, which was clearly not Suhail Mahmood. The Pakistan Foreign Secretary is talking to envoys in Islamabad, and they're all holed up they're in this huddle, and they're trying to, sort of see what to do next. And she interrupts the meeting, and there is a note from the Pakistan army, and that talks about 9 missiles from India. I'm quoting from the book. 9 missiles from India pointed towards Pakistan. How seriously did India consider at that time attacking Pakistan if harm would have come to our Air Force officer?
It was obviously quite serious. And the episode I mentioned, which was reconstructed for me by one of the diplomats in there, what they said was that from the 26th, they had been called in multiple times by the foreign secretary, then a lady by the name of Temina Janjua. And she called in these diplomats multiple times, and this was the P3, the US, UK, and France, and were having conversations, and they were in touch with their capitals, and they were in fact on that day confabulating on the 27th at the residence of the US ambassador, when they get a call saying, please come in the evening to meet the foreign secretary. And 15 minutes into that meeting, she interrupts it and reads out, and then implores them to raise this issue with their governments, because this is a serious threat. It could escalate the situation. And she asked them to raise this with their governments. And then a lot of diplomacy takes place through the night to try and reassure India of Pakistan's intention. Clearly, Pakistan gives an assurance that the Pakistan Prime Minister would make a statement the next day and guarantee the return unharmed of the Indian Parliament. And this message is clearly down. And what India says is, let's see if that happens. And so India's seriousness in taking the next steps to escalation were clear to the world and clear to Pakistan. And that's the nature of a credible threat. It has to be believable, it has to be credible.
When Imran Khan goes on television in Pakistan to make the announcement, he almost forgets. I laughed out loud at this moment in your book. He almost forgets to make the operative announcement that Abhinandan Varthaman is going to be released. That's the first question. He has to be nudged, and the Pakistan army is quite irritated with him. Uh, but Imran Khan's announcement, because so many people didn't know what was actually going on behind the scenes, that this threat of escalation had been made by India. It was described as a peace gesture, or a attempt at thawing the situation. Evidently, from your book, this was wrong. This was certainly not the case. Pakistan was singing a very different tune till they realized that India was very serious about escalation.
Absolutely. And that was a hilarious moment because Foreign Secretary Vijay Gokhale and I were sitting in his room and watching that television screen when Imran Khan was supposed to have made that statement. He ended the speech without making that assurance about returning the pilot. And we were almost getting to our phones to start confabulating on what to do next when suddenly we saw on the screen the breaking news that Imran Khan offers to send the pilot back. So, what really happened, as I learned later, was that Shah Mahmood Qureshi poked him and said, "Oh, you forgot to say this," or gave him a note in, and he was had already delivered his piece and had sat down on his seat. Then he got up again and said, "I forgot to say so," and we do it as a peace gesture. Now, the peace gesture narrative is unsurprising because you have to create a narrative around what you're doing. You can hardly make the point that we are doing it because we are worried what India would do. But again, as in Pakistan with multiple leaks, all this stuff comes out. So it comes out a year later that when a member of parliament says in a speech in parliament that in that closed door session that took place for members of parliament, Shah Mahmood Qureshi was present. Imran Khan was supposed to be in there, but for some reason he absented himself. General Bajwa was with Qureshi, and he said that his legs were shaking and there was sweat on his brow. So, clearly that is the manifestation of a credible threat of force.
And there has also been this account, and your book references it, by a former US Secretary of State, and I think we have that slide, who suggested that he'd been woken up in panic. And he alludes to how India and Pakistan came very close. In fact, I think the phrase he uses is too close to a nuclear conflict. Can I ask you, how serious was that danger? I think in your book, you say, of course, I'm talking about Mike Pompeo, never give an inch, but in your book, you say that the Americans inflated the danger and also their own role in diffusing it.
I think so. I think Mike Pompeo mentions there was a fine US role played in trying to defuse the situation, but India had issued a credible threat. The Americans had amplified it. And, what Mike Pompeo said was that when External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj spoke to him, she spoke about a nuclear danger. And therefore, he called up General Bajwa on the other side, spoke to him, and Bajwa denied there was a nuclear danger at that point of time. Uh, don't forget that Pakistan's nuclear committee had met, on the day of Balakot and made a point that they were meeting.
Mhm.
But it was not a real or a credible threat at that point of time. But the US certainly played a role. It may be somewhat exaggerated by Pompeo's kind of memoir, but it was certainly a role where, apart from the bilateral threat, the credible bilateral threat, there was also global diplomacy that was successful.
But the Prime Minister, later, looking back at this incident when Abhinandan Varthaman is safe home to a hero's welcome, at a campaign rally, talks about how a Qatal ki Raat was narrowly avoided. That had Pakistan and had Imran Khan not pragmatically released Abhinandan Varthaman, even though he tried to dress it up as if it was his own idea. And we now know from so many details in your book that this was clearly a response to India's very serious intent to attack Pakistan if needed, if it came to that. This Qatal ki Raat reference suggests that India was ready to go all out. I'm not using the N word. I'm not talking about a nuclear conflict, of course. That was, as you said, stated by the Americans. But what was the thinking? When you look at that comment by the Prime Minister, even though said in the context of a campaign rally, there is a subtext of a very real comment there about what the thinking actually was in Delhi.
As an analyst, I would say that that shows that the political leadership was prepared to take the next step of escalating a response to the crisis in case the objective of the return of the pilot was not met. So this was clearly something that was clear to the political leadership, and perhaps it was something that was an instruction to the military that was available. But whatever it is, the fact is that India had issued a threat which Pakistan believed was a genuine one, which the world believed was a genuine one, and as a result of which the pilot was returned. You know, a past NSA, Brajesh Mishra, whom you and I know well, he used to say that when during Operation Parakram, that when you issue a credible threat of force, it should be credible enough for you to believe in it yourself, that you are about to take that action. So I would simply put it that way, that yes, India believed it was about to take that action, and Pakistan believed that that action would be taken.
The reference to the 9 missiles pointed at Pakistan comes from the Pakistan Foreign Secretary and the Pakistan Army. You don't directly comment on how far India was readying to go. And of course, I don't want you to give away anything operational, but how far were we ready to go? And looking back, I'm going to ask you the same question again, because it's always asked in the India-Pakistan conflict, and from Kargil to now, was there a danger of a nuclear flashpoint?
You know, I would frame it exactly the way I did in the book, which is, as far as I was aware, I've given the evidence of what Pakistan said initially privately, and then later, even in its public communication, that 9 missiles were about to be sent to them. So I have no way of knowing it or verifying it, and nor did I attempt to do so, and nor should I know, because the way this information is treated, it's on need-to-know basis. There is no need for an Indian High Commissioner to know exactly what an operational plan is. But I think the point really is a strategic one, that India said at that point of time that it was ready to escalate the crisis in a credible, believable way.
Okay, let's talk about the Pulwama terror attack that actually led to all of these developments taking place. Now, what is very interesting in your book, and this is familiar to me as a long time student of India-Pakistan relations, this kind of division or perceived division within the Pakistan establishment every time it comes to an attack on India. So in Kargil, we wondered, did Nawaz Sharif know what Musharraf was up to? In your book, interestingly, you wonder whether the Pakistan Army chief was on board fully with Pulwama, or whether this was an ISI plan. And I want you to talk a little bit about what gave you that impression, or what led you to asking those questions.
Well, as I understand it, and from the experts on the Indian side and some conversations with the Pakistani side, that it's in the nature of these operations which are run by non-state actor organizations. Uh, it's not a very clear-cut proposal on is to be done, and the NIA investigation of 18 months also seems to suggest that it was perhaps planned to be a smaller operation. It became bigger than it was. So within that, there would be a speculation amongst the security community that perhaps it would have been a generally approved direction to go in to keep creating some trouble in Kashmir. But whose desk did it go to, the actual operation to be approved, is not something I am privy to, and I can only speculate that perhaps it didn't go to the army chief.
Yeah, you also sort of make a reference to the Bajwa doctrine. Was there a point at which Bajwa, as Pakistan army chief, wants to change sort of the entrenched proxy war approach to India? Bajwa famously meets Pakistani journalists off record and even indicates this, that look, we're bankrupt, we've got to change tack. And later, journalists whom we both know well, Naseem Zehra, Hamid Mir among them, asked for him to be court-martialed. Do you believe there was a Bajwa doctrine?
There was certainly a Bajwa doctrine, but an evolving Bajwa doctrine. You know, the thing about Pakistan army chiefs is that somewhere in the middle of their term, uh, after a year or 2 years, the ISPR, which is their public relations agency, tries to put across a doctrine and to, kind of position them as leaders with a vision, and they try to make a statement. And recently an Asim Munir doctrine has been made public.
I
So
have questions about that also, but go ahead and complete your point. Yes.
yeah. So Bajwa had that doctrine. It did talk about peace with the neighbors, and it did later talk about, and the media was adding elements to it, that it wanted an apolitical or neutral army, and it wanted then later emphasis on geoeconomics, which means that let's fix our economy rather than obsessing about our political existence. So there was a Bajwa doctrine, a Bajwa vision of sorts, and particularly an army chief who rules that country for 6 years would have notions about where he wants to take Pakistan and how he wants to deal with India. But I think all that in Bajwa's case, I would call him a very hesitant reformer, because he would very easily go on to the default position of dealing with issues or just letting them be. He was not a decisive, visionary leader in
He
that
was not a
sense.
Musharraf style risk taker, basically.
Exactly, exactly. So he was a cautious man, and he wouldn't really walk the talk till the end.
Now, Ambassador Bisaria, what's very interesting in your book is this idea that the Pulwama Balakot matrix actually flips something in Pakistan. Till the abrogation of 370, and we'll get to that. But actually, after Pulwama terror attack, India strikes back, Abhinandan comes home. Your book suggests that Pakistan is then keen to pick up the pieces. And what's interesting is that Asim Munir, who is presently the Pakistan Army Chief, then the head of the ISI, is through kind of mediator, somebody close to him, sending you feelers about this, sending you feelers about the fact that Pakistan actually wants to end the long project of terrorism in Kashmir. How credible did you find that message from Munir, if I may call it that?
I think it was a reasonably credible message, but don't forget, at that point he was the sort of deputy of Bajwa. So whether he was articulating the Bajwa doctrine or what his boss had told him, and whether it was a posture taken with not too much reality, or whether he genuinely believes in it, I think the jury is still out on where he stands on that. But certainly Bajwa believed and said so in private conversations and public conversations that this was not a strategy, particularly in the wake of Balakot, that had helped Pakistan, that had been in the interest of Pakistan. And the low cost proxy war, which the army had favored as something that had been useful for them, was no longer a useful tool because the cost of it had gone up after Balakot. So I think there was a certain rethink on it, whether that rethink was interrupted by Article 370, or whether that rethink itself was so hesitant that it couldn't be carried through. That is something that analysts must study.
I know I have just a few more minutes left, but quickly on this one point, the rethink went so far at that point as suggesting that, if there was a swearing in where SARC leaders were invited, Imran Khan would be happy to attend. They were quite sure that Mr. Modi was going to win again. They wanted Imran Khan to attend the SCO meet in India. So it was a pretty big rethink.
Yes, I would argue it was. And they were certainly at Bajwa's prodding. Perhaps Imran Khan was believing in it. But then Imran Khan, after Article 370, ran away with the talking points, the initial talking points,
Yeah.
and did not, have the experience or capacity to nuance that position. He shut a door which should have been left a little ajar. And the argument is that at that point, Bajwa was interested in his extension, so he wasn't following the file very closely. So Imran Khan perhaps ran away with that and led to a situation where Pakistan's subsequent leaders could not reverse that position, that we can't talk to you until Article 370 is reversed.
Now, strange things happen even between adversarial nations. In the past, Indian intelligence helped Musharraf when a Jaish Mohammed, sort of strike was targeted against him. Your book reveals that there was a tip-off from the ISI to you about an imminent Al-Qaeda attack in Kashmir. Talk about that.
Yes, so that was, I think, a very interesting development. And I took from it the lesson that Pakistan perhaps was not interested or did not specifically want another Pulwama. What happened was that there was a tip off that came to me. Now, it's not unusual for Pakistan to tip off India or India to tip off Pakistan. These things happen outside the public domain between intelligence agencies for various reasons at various points. But to escalate it to the political level of the Indian High Commissioner and to say, yes, we've sent it through our normal channels, but we also want you to know, was to flag it politically and make a point that there's some things changing and we don't have the appetite for another Pulwama. So if something like this happens, please don't blame us. I think that was the point that we were seeing, that Pakistan was trying to make it clear to India and perhaps also the world that it was not favoring continuing this terrorism indiscriminately.
Finally, I mean, I could talk to you for hours about India, Pakistan, but I know you're a much wanted man today in terms of interviews. So finally, let's talk about your expulsion, the present. So we have Pakistan attempting this rethink post Balakot, post Pulwama. This tip off happens. This is, I think, in June 2019, and then August 5th happens. And 370 is gone, and everything changes in Pakistan's response to India. You are asked to leave, and you discover that technically you are the first High Commissioner to have been expelled in this manner because previously Vijay Nambiar was actually withdrawn. Now what happens? Now we are in a situation where Imran Khan is out, Shah Mahmood Qureshi is out, Nawaz Sharif is in. He's making a lot of peace noises. However, as you write towards the end of your book, there is a diminishing sort of interest in Pakistan. In fact, I think you quote Shiv Shankar Menon to say it's Pakistan's secular slide into irrelevance. This is now a one-issue relationship, and that is of security from an Indian perspective. You also quote Steve Cohen, who spoke about how India and Pakistan may be shooting for a century. How do you see things today?
Well, in a flux. I think the fact that Pakistan is going through a poly crisis at this point, with the underlying economic crisis, the sins of the past coming home to roost altogether, is makes it a very difficult challenge because Pakistan is now going through internal turmoil, and from a policy point of view for India, there is very little coherence in what is happening in Pakistan. But I see 2024 with cautious hope because there'll be an election in Pakistan, perhaps coherence, perhaps even if it's a selected prime minister in the shape of Nawaz Sharif, he would be in the same page as with the army. And a new government in India, new governments coming in is always a time for fresh thinking and looking at issues anew. And I think there is some possibility of some rapprochement uh, during this period. Also, we've gone 5 years without a major terrorist attack in February, and that it's also counts. So, if I was guiding Pakistan, I would ask them to try to become a normal country, to eschew terrorism, to get the economy out of its get the army out of its economy, try to normalize, and for its own benefit. And within that, it would also benefit with a good relationship that it could establish with its neighbors, and particularly India and Afghanistan.
But sorry, just to squeeze in a follow up to that, Nawaz Sharif is currently in step with the army, but the last couple of times he's tried to build relations with India or tried to assert his authority over the Pakistan army chief. He's been shown the prison door, literally, or the exile gate. What makes you think that something might be different this time around? And what gives you that cautious hope?
Well, because the army needs the Project Nawaz to extinguish the bad memories of Project Imran. Imran is still a force within, even from prison, writing pieces for The Economist. And also, I think to be credible, they would need to be supporting Nawaz and letting that continue. Now, there may be a contract with Nawaz that this time he will take the army on board, but you and I know that Nawaz develops a mid-term itch each time where he suddenly realizes that he's not running the country. So, if in a scenario that he is in charge, will he take the army on board, or will he continue to
Yeah.
he says he'll probably want to live to fight another day, and he would probably want to go on in the short term and take it as it comes later.
Well, Ajay Bisaria, we didn't get into the weeds of the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed, the two terror groups that are on top of India's concerns, dossier after dossier, sort of submitted before Pakistan. You seem to suggest that before the abrogation of 370, there was some move to arrest Jaish-e-Mohammed operators. Before we let you go, I want to ask you, given that you were expelled after the abrogation of 370, Pakistan has pushed itself into a corner because India is not going to roll this back. The Supreme Court has now upheld this abrogation. What is the face saver available to Pakistan to come back from its position that we won't talk to India given the abrogation?
Well, Pakistan can develop several face savers. The Supreme Court, in its recent judgment, is probably giving them one. Elections in Jammu and Kashmir might be a proxy for reversing Article 370. In India, is clear that the its Pakistan policy and Kashmir policy are separate, and Pakistan has no locus standi in Kashmir policy, which will go on its own steam. But that might give Pakistan a face saver to come out of the little corner that Imran Khan painted it in.
Okay, I'm going to say thank you to you. Otherwise, we'll be here for hours, and I know you don't have that time. Your book it needs to be read by every serious student of this region. And there was a lot of historical narrative in it, which I didn't have time to touch upon. Thank you very much, Ambassador Bisaria, and congratulations on this book that is climbing up on the bestseller charts with its dramatic revelations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barkha. Great to talk to you.
Thank you. Take care. Mojo's Story has always made a commitment to its viewers to go to where the story is. And as you can see here, we are at the epicenter of the Israel war on Gaza. We are right at the front line, about 1 mile from the Gaza Strip, as the Israeli military gets ready with its tanks and its gunners to begin its final frontal assault that will take troops into Gaza. As we said, we are not like other organizations. We believe in giving you all sides of the story objectively and as much as possible from the ground. And that's exactly what we're doing here, covering the biggest global story today from the epicenter of the war zone. So please, we need your support. Support us, become a Mojo member, subscribe to us, spread the word, and thank you for your support.